The village of Odua lay nestled between rolling hills and the mighty Niger River, its waters shimmering under the golden sun. Here, life was dictated by the ancient traditions, the whispers of the ancestors and the unseen forces that roamed between the spirit and mortal realms. On a fateful night, under the glow of a blood-red moon, a child was born. Her cries echoed through the thatched huts. But instead of the usual celebration, a heavy silence fell upon the elders who had gathered outside. The river speaks, Baba Oro, the village priest, his old eyes narrowing as he gazed at the sky. A child born under such a moon belongs not only to this world. Inside the small hut, Iyabo, the mother, clutched her newborn to her chest, her heart swelling with joy and fear. She had waited years for this moment, prayed, wept, and even sought help from the spirits when her womb refused to bear fruit. Now she had a daughter. They named her Adesua, meaning born into wealth, for she was to be her parents' greatest treasure. But as the child grew, strange things began to happen. By the time she was 5, she could sense things before they happened. When her father, Okon, lost a goat, Adesua simply pointed towards the forest, and there it was. When a terrible storm was about to strike, she woke her mother in the middle of the night crying, "The river is angry." Hours later, the village flooded. The elders whispered among themselves, but no one spoke aloud what many feared. Adesua was different. As the years passed, her beauty became undeniable. Her skin glowed like the morning sun, and her eyes held a depth that seemed beyond her years. But it was when she turned 18 that her life took a turn no one expected. One evening, Adesua walked to the riverbank to fetch water. The air was thick with humidity, the scent of wet earth filling her lungs as she dipped her calabash into the river. A strange sensation prickled at the back of her neck. Then she saw him. A tall, majestic figure stood on the water as if it were solid ground. His skin was dark and glistening, like polished obsidian, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. He wore robes of deep blue that billowed around him, though there was no wind. "Adesua," he said, his voice both powerful and hypnotic. Her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to run, but her feet refused to move. A strange warmth spread through her body, her heart pounding in a rhythm that did not feel like her own. The figure extended a hand. "Come to me." Then in the blink of an eye, he was gone. Adesua gasped, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Had she imagined it? Was it a trick of the light? Shaking, she grabbed her calabash and hurried home, the weight of unseen eyes following her into the night. The night was heavy with silence when Adesua returned home, her heart still racing from the encounter at the river. She tried to push the image of the mysterious figure from her mind, but his voice echoed in her ears, like a song only she could hear. Her mother, Iyabo, noticed her distress. "Adesua, what is it?" she asked, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Adesua hesitated. Should she speak of what she had seen? Would they even believe her? Taking a deep breath, she shook her head. "Nothing, Mama, just tired." Iyabo studied her for a moment, then sighed. "Rest, my child. Tomorrow is a new day." But that night, sleep did not come easily. As Adesua lay on her mat, the air in the room grew thick, heavy, almost suffocating. Suddenly, she was no longer in her hut. She stood beneath the ocean in a vast kingdom of shimmering blue and gold. Pearls and coral decorated the palace walls, and the ground beneath her feet was not sand, but smooth, glistening stone. At the center of the throne room sat the same man she had seen at the river. This time, his presence was even more commanding. His robes shimmered like waves under the moonlight, and his crown, encrusted with seashells and gemstones, gleamed with an ethereal glow. "Adesua," he called, his voice deep and resonant. She felt herself drawn to him, her body moving without her consent. As she stepped forward, he smiled. "You belong to me," he said. "You always have." Adesua's eyes widened. Who are you?" "I am Oba Nkele, ruler of the river and master of the water spirits. You were promised to me before your birth, and now the time has come for you to take your rightful place by my side." Fear clutched at her chest. "No, I do not belong to you. I am of the earth, not the water." Oba Nkele's smile did not waver. "You will understand in time. For now, rest, my love. You will soon see the truth." The world around her blurred, and suddenly she was back in her hut, gasping for breath. Had it been a dream, or something more? The following days brought no peace. Adesua found herself drawn to the river against her will, as if an invisible force guided her steps. She would stand at the water's edge, lost in thoughts, feeling its pull deep within her soul. Then, the misfortunes began. The first suitor who sought her hand in marriage, a strong young hunter named Jide, suddenly fell ill the night before he was to visit her family. His sickness was strange. His skin grew cold, his body weak, as if something unseen drained the life from him. The next suitor, a wealthy merchant's son, drowned mysteriously in the same river where she had seen Oba Nkele. The villagers whispered. Some said she was cursed, others said she was a witch. Her parents, desperate for answers, took her to Baba Oro, the village priest. The old man studied her closely, then cast cowries upon the ground. As he read their meaning, his face darkened. "You are married in the spirit world," he declared. "A powerful water spirit has claimed you as his wife. No mortal man may have you, for the river king watches over you with jealous eyes." A cold chill ran through Adesua. "No, this cannot be." Baba Oro turned to Iyabo, his gaze piercing. "Woman, what have you done?" Iyabo trembled, her lips quivering as she clutched her daughter's hand. I did not know it would come to this," she whispered. "I only wanted a child." Adesua's blood turned to ice. "Mama, what do you mean?" Tears welled in Iyabo's eyes. "For years I was barren. I prayed to the gods, but no child came. In my desperation, I went to the river and pleaded for a child. That night, in my dream, a voice answered saying my womb would be opened. But in return, the child I would bear would belong to the water." Adesua staggered back, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "So, I was given to him before I was even born?" Baba Oro nodded grimly. "The bond is strong, Adesua. If you wish to be free, you must be prepared for war. A war not just of the body, but of the spirit." Adesua clenched her fists, fire burning in her heart. She would not accept this fate. She would fight. Adesua sat in the dimly lit hut, her hands trembling in her lap. Her mother's confession weighed on her like a heavy stone, each word echoing in her mind. "I only wanted a child. In return, you were given to the water." She wanted to scream, to cry, to demand why her mother had not told her this sooner. Instead, her voice came out in a whisper. "Mama, how could you do this to me?" Yabo's eyes brimmed with tears as she reached for her daughter's hands. "I did not know it would come to this, Adesua. I was desperate. The shame of childlessness nearly broke me. I prayed to the gods, but none answered. Then the river spoke to me." Baba Oro, the village priest, sat cross-legged in the corner, silently listening. The flickering oil lamp cast shadows across his aged face, making him look even older than his years. "Tell me everything," he finally said. Iyabo took a shaky breath. "It was many years ago. One night, when the pain of my barrenness became unbearable. I walked to the river. I fell to my knees, crying out to the spirits, begging them to bless my womb. Then the water stirred. A voice, deep and powerful, spoke from the river. It told me I would conceive, but in return, my child would be his. She squeezed Adesua's hand tightly. At that moment, I would have agreed to anything. I did not understand what I had done. I thought it was only words. Adesua yanked her hands away, her eyes burning with anger and betrayal. It was never just words, Mama. You gave me away before I was even born. Silence filled the room. The only sound was the distant croaking of frogs and the occasional rustling of the wind outside. Baba Oro cleared his throat. The river spirits do not give without taking. The moment you made that vow, Adesua's fate was sealed. He turned to Adesua. Now the question is, do you wish to break the bond? Adesua met his gaze, her jaw tightening. Yes, Baba Oro sighed. Then you must prepare yourself. A spiritual marriage is not like a union between mortals. To break it is to go against the will of a being far more powerful than any man. Yabo gasped. Baba Oro, please, there must be another way. There is no easy way, he replied briefly. Oba Nkele will not release her willingly. He is a jealous spirit, one who does not take rejection lightly. Adesua took a deep breath, pushing aside her fear. Tell me what I must do. Baba Oro studied her, his wrinkled face unreadable. To sever a spiritual marriage, you will need to seek one who understands both the ways of the spirits and the ways of war. Adesua frowned. Who? The mountain seer, Baba Oro said. Mama Efun. Yabo gasped, shaking her head. No, that woman is dangerous. People say she has battled spirits and lived, but at what cost? She is your only hope, Baba Oro said firmly. But beware, Adesua, once you walk this path, there is no turning back. If you challenge Oba Nkele, he will fight to keep what is his. Adesua swallowed hard. She had already made up her mind. If the River King wanted war, then war he would get. The morning sun rose over Odua village, casting long shadows over the huts and fields. Adesua had barely slept. The weight of Baba Oro's words and her mother's confession pressed heavily on her. If she was truly married to a spirit, how much of her life was truly her own? She decided not to wait. If she was going to find Mama Efun, she needed to leave soon. But as she stepped outside, the first sign of a spiritual bond made itself known. A strange hush fell over the village. The air grew thick, suffocating as if the world held its breath. The wind, which had been gentle moments ago, suddenly howled through the trees. The villagers stopped their morning tasks, looking around in confusion. Then Adesua heard it, a whisper carried by the wind. You are mine, Adesua. Her body stiffened. The voice was unmistakable, Oba Nkele. A sudden force gripped her, and she felt herself being pulled toward the river. Her feet moved against her will, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She tried to resist, digging her heels in the earth, but it was as if invisible hands were dragging her forward. Adesua, her mother's voice broke through the trance, and she felt strong hands grab her shoulders. Yabo and Baba Oro were beside her, their faces wide with fear. Baba Oro muttered incantations under his breath, sprinkling white chalk in a circle around her. The moment the last bit of chalk touched the ground, the invisible force released her. Adesua gasped, falling into her mother's hands. What happened? She whispered. Baba Oro's face was grim. Oba Nkele is growing impatient. He will not let you go easily. Yabo clutched her daughter tightly. her voice trembling. "We must go to Mama Efun now." Baba Oro nodded. "Prepare yourself, child. The journey to the mountains here is long and dangerous. But if you truly wish to be free, you must go before Oba Nkele tightens his grip." Adesua wiped her tears, standing tall despite the fear creeping into her heart. She had made her choice. She would fight. The journey to the mountains was long and treacherous. Adesua, accompanied by her mother and Baba Oro, moved swiftly through dense forest and narrow footpaths. The weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily upon her. She knew Oba Nkele would not sit idly by while she sought her freedom. As they approached the base of the mountain, the air shifted. The trees stood taller, their branches twisting unnaturally. A thick mist rolled in, wrapping around them like unseen fingers. "We are close," Baba Oro muttered, his staff tapping against the rocky path. Mama Efun's presence keeps unwanted spirits away, but be warned, her price for help is never small. Iyabo hesitated. What if she refuses? Then Adesua's fate is sealed. Baba Oro replied solemnly. A shiver ran down Adesua's spine. She clenched her fists, determination flaring within her. She would not turn back now. At the peak of the mountain stood a lone hut, its roof covered in dried leaves, its walls lined with strange markings. Smoke curled from a small fire outside, where an old woman sat grinding herbs with slow, deliberate movements. Mama Efun, her eyes milky white yet piercing, lifted as they approached. "I have been expecting you." Adesua swallowed. "You know why we have come?" The seer nodded. "The river calls for its bride, but the bride seeks to break her chains." She rose to her feet, stepping closer, her gaze never leaving Adesua. "You carry his mark, child. You are bound to the water as a fish is to the river. Severing that bond will not be easy." Adesua took a deep breath. "I am ready." Mama Efun studied her for a long moment, then gestured toward the fire. "Sit." As Adesua lowered herself into the mat, Mama Efun reached into a gourd and pulled out a handful of cowrie shells. She whispered over them, then tossed them onto the ground. The moment the shells landed, a gust of wind howled through the hut. The seer's face darkened. "He knows you are here." A sudden crash outside made Iyabo gasp. The fire flickered violently, and the walls of the hut trembled. A deep rumbling voice filled the air. "She is mine!" Adesua's heart pounded. Oba Nkele was watching. Mama Efun's voice remained steady. "You have angered him, but anger is not power. Strength lies in the will to fight." She turned to Adesua, her gaze sharp. "If you wish to be free, you must undergo the ritual of severance. It is dangerous, for he will come for you with all his might. But if you succeed, his hold over you will break." Adesua exhaled shakily. "What must I do?" The seer reached into a clay pot, pulling out a small dagger with strange inscriptions. She pressed it into Adesua's palm. "You must face him at the river," she said. "At midnight, when the veil between worlds is thin. If your will is stronger than his, this blade will sever his bond to you." A heavy silence fell over them. Iyabo clutched her daughter's hand. "Are you sure about this, Adesua?" Adesua tightened her grip on the dagger, her fear giving way to resolve. "I will not be his." The night was heavy with silence as Adesua stood at the riverbank, the dagger clutched tightly in her trembling hands. The moon hung low, casting a silver glow over the restless waters. Mama Efun's word echoed in her mind. "At midnight, when the veil between worlds is thin, you must confront him. If your will is stronger, this blade will sever his bond to you." Beside her, Baba Oro drew protective symbols in the sand, muttering incantations under his breath. Iyabo held a calabash filled with sacred herbs, her face lined with worry. "Once we begin," Mama Efun warned, "there is no turning back." Adesua nodded, swallowing her fear. She had come too far to back down now. The wind howled as Baba Oro poured a libation onto the ground. The earth trembled slightly, and the river began to churn violently. The air thickened, making it harder to breathe. Then, from the depths of the water, he emerged, Oba Nkele. His form was both mesmerizing and terrifying, a towering figure with glistening dark skin, eyes that shone like molten gold, and hair that moved like waves of the sea. The very air crackled with power as he stepped onto the shore. His gaze locked onto Adesua. "You dare defy me?" His voice was like the crashing of waves, shaking the very ground beneath them. Adesua tightened her grip on the dagger. "I was never yours to claim," she shouted, her voice steadier than she expected. Oba Nkele's lips curled into a smirk. "You were mine before you took your first breath. Your mother offered you to me willingly. Do you think a mere blade can undo a sacred vow?" The river surged, sending waves crashing onto the shore. A powerful force lifted Adesua off her feet, throwing her to the ground. Pain shot through her body, but she forced herself up. Mama Efun's voice rang out, "Hold your ground, child. He feeds on fear. Do not give it to him." Oba Nkele's eyes darkened. "You will come with me now." Suddenly, thick water like tendrils shot from his outstretched hands, wrapping around Adesua's wrists and ankles. She gasped as an overwhelming cold seeped into her bones, pulling her towards the river. "No!" Iyabo cried, throwing the sacred herbs into the tendrils. Smoke sizzled as the vines recoiled, releasing Adesua. Oba Nkele snarled, his form flickering like a shadow. "You cannot win, little one." Adesua staggered to her feet, raising the dagger. "Watch me." With a deep breath, she stepped forward, plunging the blade into the ground. A blinding light erupted from the earth, sending shock waves through the river. The air filled with an unearthly wail as Oba Nkele staggered back, his form flickering erratically. His golden eyes met hers, no longer with arrogance but with rage. "You will regret this." A final burst of light surged from the dagger, and with a deafening roar, Oba Nkele vanished into the depths of the river. The water stilled, the wind ceased, silence returned. Adesua collapsed onto her knees, gasping for air. It was over, or so she thought. Mama Efun's voice broke the stillness. "This is only the beginning." The night was eerily silent as Adesua sat by the dying embers of the ritual fire, her body aching from the battle. The river had returned to its calm state, but an unsettling feeling gnawed at her. Mama Efun watched her closely. "You wounded him, but you did not destroy him." Adesua's heart pounded. "I thought the ritual was supposed to break his hold on me." "The bond is weakened, but Oba Nkele is a being of ancient power. He will not let you go so easily." Mama Efun's voice was grave. "You have defied him, embarrassed him. Now he will retaliate." A cold gust of wind swept through the clearing, carrying whispers from the unseen world. Then the first sign of his wrath came, a scream from the village. Adesua shot to her feet. "Mama!" Iyabo gasped. "The village!" Without hesitation, they ran. Baba Oro gripped his staff tightly, his chants filling the air as they sprinted down the mountain. When they arrived at Odua, chaos greeted them. Huts were overturned. The river had flooded parts of the land, and villagers screamed in terror. The air reeked of damp earth and something more sinister, the scent of something ancient and vengeful. Adesua's blood ran cold. "He did this." An elder, breathless and terrified, stumbled towards them. The river spirits, they came in the night, they took people." "Who?" Baba Oro demanded. The elder's face twisted with grief. "The children, they took the children." A chill ran down Adesua's spine. She turned towards the river, her fists clenched. She had fought her freedom, but now others were paying the price. Oba Nkele's voice echoed through the wind, deep and menacing. You thought you could defy me without consequence? If I cannot have you, I will take everything you love. Tears burned Adesua's eyes. This was her fault. She challenged him, and now innocent lives were at stake. Mama Efun placed a firm hand on her shoulder. You have a choice, child. Run, and he will destroy everything, or face him again and finish what you started. Adesua wiped her tears. There was no choice. I will end this. The air was thick with fear as Adesua stood at the edge of the river, her heart pounding like the beating of a war drum. The cries of the villagers still echoed behind her, but she had no time to hesitate. The children are in his world now, Mama Efun said, drawing a line in the sand with her staff. To bring them back, you must enter the spirit realm. Baba Oro nodded grimly, but he will be warned. Oba Nkele will be waiting. This time, he will not just fight to keep you, he will fight to destroy you. Adesua swallowed hard, gripping the enchanted dagger Mama Efun had given her. She had come too far to turn back now. Yabo clutched her daughter's hand. Come back to me, my child. I will, Adesua promised, though she wasn't sure if she truly believed it. Mama Efun placed a calabash filled with sacred water at Adesua's feet. Step into the river and drink from this god. It will transport you to his realm. Adesua nodded, stepping forward. The water was ice cold as it touched her skin. She took a deep breath and lifted the calabash to her lips. The moment the liquid touched her tongue, the world around her shifted. A violent gust of wind howled through the air. The river glowed with an eerie blue light, and suddenly Adesua was no longer in Odua. She was somewhere else. She stood on an endless stretch of dark water, the sky above her swirling with storm clouds. In the distance, she saw a massive palace made of shimmering black stone, Oba Nkele's domain. The moment her feet touched the surface, a deep rumbling voice filled the air. You are a fool to come here. Oba Nkele appeared before her, his golden eyes burning with fury. The stolen children stood behind him, their eyes empty, their bodies surrounded by a strange mist. Adesua raised her dagger. I am here to take them back. Oba Nkele laughed, the sound vibrating through the entire room. You think a mere mortal can challenge a god? With a flick of his wrist, the water beneath her churned violently. Shadowy hands shot from the depths, grabbing at her ankles, pulling her under. Adesua gasped, struggling against their grip. The water swallowed her whole, dragging her into the abyss. Darkness surrounded her, the pressure of the ocean crushing against her chest. Then a voice, soft yet powerful, whispered in her ear, Remember who you are. Adesua's eyes snapped open. A surge of energy rushed through her veins. She slashed at the shadows with the dagger, and the darkness recoiled. She burst through the water's surface, gasping for air. Oba Nkele's smirk faded. You are stronger than I thought, he mused. Adesua pointed the dagger at him. And I'm just getting started. The final battle had begun. The air in Oba Nkele's realm crackled with energy as Adesua steadied herself on the dark waters. The stolen children stood motionless behind the River King, their eyes empty, their bodies surrounded by swirling mist. Oba Nkele's golden eyes burned with amusement. You fight against your destiny, Adesua, but you were born to belong to me. Adesua gripped the enchanted dagger tighter. I was born to be free. Oba Nkele's smirk vanished. With a flick of his wrist, the water beneath her roared to life, rising into monstrous waves, their shapes twisting into terrifying figures with glowing eyes and gaping mouths. They lunged toward her. Adesua didn't hesitate. She slashed the dagger through the air, and a burst of light erupted from its blade. The spectral waves shrieked and recoiled. dispersing into mist. Oba Nkele snarled, "You dare wield that against me?" "This ends tonight," Adesua charged, her feet barely skimming the water's surface. Oba Nkele raised his hands, and giant shadowy tendrils erupted from the depths, wiping towards her. She dodged, rolling to the side as one nearly struck her. With a cry, she drove the dagger into the water beneath her. A shockwave of light exploded outward, forcing Oba Nkele to stagger back. The children gasped as the mist around them flickered. His hold on them was weakening. "No!" Oba Nkele roared. "I will not lose you." He launched forward, his massive form looming over her. The shadows of the realm twisted, trying to consume her, but Adesua felt something shift within her. A strength older than time rose in her chest. She thought of her mother, her village, the children who had been stolen. She thought of the pain Oba Nkele had caused, and she knew she was not just fighting for herself, she was fighting for all of them. With a scream, she drove the dagger forward, piercing Oba Nkele's chest. A deafening roar shook the realm as the River King staggered backward, his golden eyes wide with shock. Cracks of light spread across his body, his form beginning to dissolve. The sky above them shattered, and the dark waters began to churn violently. The stolen children gasped as the mist around them vanished. Their eyes regained clarity. Oba Nkele fell to his knees, his once powerful form flickering like a dying flame. His voice was no longer thunderous, it was weak, almost pleading. "You think you have won?" he rasped. "But I will always exist in the waters, in the bloodline." Adesua stared at him, unflinching. "You have no power over me anymore." With one final burst of light, Oba Nkele vanished into nothingness. The world around them trembled. The dark waters began to collapse, swirling into a vortex. Adesua felt herself being pulled weightlessly, spiraling into the unknown. And then, suddenly, she awoke. She was back in the riverbank in Odua, the calabash still clutched in her hands. The stolen children lay beside her, safe and breathing. A relieved cry broke the silence. "My child!" Yabo rushed to Adesua, pulling her into a tight embrace. Baba Oro and Mama Efun stood nearby, watching with solemn pride. The sky above them was clear, the village untouched by Oba Nkele's wrath. It was over. Adesua was free, but deep in the river, where the waters ran dark and deep, a whisper lingered, "I will return." Days passed, and the village of Odua slowly returned to peace. The stolen children were reunited with their families, their laughter once again filling the air. The river, once a source of fear, now flowed calmly under the golden sun. Adesua sat by the water's edge, watching the ripples dance beneath the breeze. For the first time in her life, she felt truly free. Mama Efun joined her, her old eyes filled with wisdom. "You did what many could not, child. You faced a god and lived to tell the tale." Adesua exhaled, tracing patterns in the sand. "Then why does it feel like something lingers?" Mama Efun was silent for a moment before she spoke. "The spirits do not die as men do. They shift, they change, they wait." Adesua shivered. "Do you think you will return?" The old woman placed a reassuring hand on her shoulders. "Perhaps, but you are no longer a helpless girl, bound by an unseen force. You are a woman who has defied the gods. If he returns, he will find you stronger than before." Adesua nodded, letting the words settle in her heart. That night, as she lay in her hut, she dreamt of the river. In her vision, the waters were clear, reflecting the move above her. But as she stepped closer, a dark shape shifted beneath the surface. A familiar voice, soft as the wind, whispered, "I will always be watching Adesua." She jolted awake, her heart pounding. For a moment, she thought she heard the distant sound of water sloshing against the shore, though the night was still. Adesua clenched her fist. "Watch all you want," she murmured. "I am not afraid anymore." And as the first light of dawn broke over Odua, she stepped out of her hut, ready to embrace the life that was finally hers to live.